Good morning, good lunchtime, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're joining us. Myself and Paul Kelly, we are back. That can mean only one thing in preview mode. And we've got a couple of tasty fights for you this week, heading in two divisions, the super featherweight and heavyweight division. But this video will be on the super featherweight contest taking place in Manchester Arena, the 13th of April. This is a fantastic British fight, Paul, which I think will have reverberations on the world scene. We're talking about, of course, Jordan Gill, a man, a renaissance man, a man rejuvenated, versus Zelfa Barrett, who obviously is a guy who's with a very credible, respectful record, had a Rakimov, but has tried to rebuild since then. Without wishing to go too much into I suppose each fighter's CV, they're both obviously well known now, aren't they, by British, I suppose, audiences who have been following 28-2 and a 30-2 record for both men. So they've had a lot of fights. People know who they are. I'm going to hit you, Paul, with a difficult question, I suppose, first. The first one's maybe not as difficult. The second one will be more difficult. But the first one I'll ask you, Paul, is can either of these men, at any stage of their careers, one's 29, one's 30, win a world title? Yes or no?
Thanks for having me on, mate. And it's a really good question. I'm a big fan of both here. I think I've got a lot of time for both Jordan Gill and Zelfa Barrett. So to answer that question, I would really hope that they maybe get another chance. Obviously, Zelfa Barrett's had his shot already. Um, nearly got it. Obviously, that vacant title shot when Joe Cordina was stripped. He knocked down Rakimov early on in that fight with a peach of a shot, but obviously Rakimov then ended up stopping Zelfa Barrett. And Rakimov then has obviously since then lost again. So I don't know whether that's aged brilliantly actually, that loss. Um, so it's hard to say. Yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? I suppose it depends on the division. They're both obviously campaigning at super featherweight now. Um, which is a division that you've obviously got Cordina in, he's fighting Kache. You've obviously got Lee Wood, hopefully going to be campaigning up there now. Navarrete seems to be campaigning around those weights. Oscar Valdez maybe rejuvenated as well. Is he wanting to be at super featherweight? You've obviously got the rest of the champions too. It's tough, mate. I don't know. I don't think so. I'm gonna say I don't think either man can win a world title, unfortunately. But I am here for it if they can because like I've got a huge amount of time for both. As I've said at the beginning, especially Jordan Gill as well. After the story we heard about him outside of the ring, in the aftermath of that Michael Conlan victory, kind of pouring his heart out in that interview and giving us an insight into what his life's been like recently. Absolutely incredible. But unfortunately, mate, I don't think I can see either man winning a world title. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Paul, I thought you were perilously close there to leaning towards Zelfa Barrett becoming world champion one stage, but I actually have to agree with you as well. I for that again, as you mentioned the names that you talked about, obviously the division, Navarrete, Shaki Foster, again, Lee Wood up there. I just don't think beat those either the champions or, like I said, the Valdez or those guys sort of climbing the high up in the sort of rankings of those divisions either. So for me, it's a no. Again, like you mentioned, Jordan Gill's story, the romance, it would be, if you sort of lift the world title, it'd be absolutely fantastic. I'm very much here for it if he even won a world title. But yeah, for me, I just unfortunately can't see it. But I suppose it leads on to challenging couple of questions, Paul. I'm going to ask you now, actually, to do with this fight. So without wanting to give your prediction, obviously we'll come to predictions at the end of this video. So it's an interesting one for me is firstly, where do you think the winner of this fight will go? But secondly, and I think actually a very, very hard question, do you think the loser of this fight will go? So Paul, if you just give me a bit of I suppose a summary of how you see both guys' careers going, should they win or lose on Manchester Arena?
It's such a difficult question. You're right. I think the winner here is in a brilliant position. Whether or not they get a world title shot next remains to be seen. But you've got to say that the winner here, like all roads do lead to a world title, maybe even before the end of the year. Well, this fight obviously on 13th of April, so you've got plenty of time still left in 2024. You'd like to think that if it's not the winner of this fight, if it's not next, then maybe in two fights' time, you'd like to think, provided they keep winning, of course, and they'd be maybe put into a final eliminator for a world title or something along those lines. But I'd like to see the winner definitely. I'd say the winner here is definitely on their way to a world title shot. That's the easy part of the question answered. The difficult part of the question answered, where does the loser go? I really don't know. It was one of them where prior to Mick Conlan, if you had have said Jordan Gill loses this fight, where's he going? Like, you know, it would have been difficult to see Jordan Gill even on that many big shows and stuff. after his loss to Kiko Martinez. Then he say had have lost to Conlon, that would have been back-to-back defeats against guys who are just on that fringe level as well now. So that have put Jordan Gill back down domestically. Similarly, Zelfa Barrett, obviously, he has those two losses, one of which was a good while ago now against Ronnie the Shark Clark. Shout out Ronnie Clark. But since then, obviously, there's that one defeat to Shavkat Rakhimov. I think a loss here isn't career ending by any stretch. I'm not going full McKendry, but I do think that they're in a difficult position. If you do lose this, I think you'd maybe be forced to take fights with up and coming hot prospects from Britain potentially. But yeah, not the end of the road, but I think the loser here could maybe have to go in with a lot more 50-50 fights down the line with up and coming domestic fighters for Commonwealth British belts along those lines. But then they can definitely come again. What about you, mate? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a very, very tough question. I think you've done very, very well to answer that. The depth. I think I agree with you actually on the winner. The winner's easier to call, like you said. Even though we don't think the winner is going to make for a world champion at one day, obviously you can kind of go up that ranks, and it's also obviously number one British prospect in there, number one British fighter in that division as well. Arguably, Lee would obviously, like you say, is coming up as well. So maybe there's a chance for that sort of British fight again to happen elsewhere down the line. But the loser for me again, I totally. Jordan Gill was written off the last couple of times. You feel like in some ways to the abyss in some ways, and so for me, I always feel like if he loses, I struggle to see where he goes. I struggle to also see, to be honest with you, where Zelfa Barrett goes if he loses. I think Zelfa Barrett, for some reason, just obviously with the CV he's had and the positioning he's had, seems to probably be a bit safer, a bit more secure, maybe in the sort of way that in the organisation structure that he has. Maybe he doesn't flow or have the same sort of risk as Jordan Gill, but I also feel like for both men, it's almost, like you say, it's almost maybe taking tough fight or maybe even easier fights against some sort of journeyman, a very, very slow build towards something being a very sort of title. They'll be in the abyss for some time. I would like to see them, frankly, but I find that question very, very hard to answer just because the landscape is kind of so bleak in that division in some ways domestically. So it's easier to match the winner. But Paul, obviously we've shared insight here. This is the review show and sorry, the preview show, and part of that preview show is obviously predictions. So I'm gonna, occasionally you like to go first, but I'm not gonna take the opportunity to dig you out here and go first. I'm gonna come straight to you, Paul, and say, who do you think wins on the 5th of April and how?
Yeah, I don't know whether I could end up having egg in my face here, but I'm gonna go big. I'm very confident in this as well. I'm going Jordan Gill stoppage. I think Jordan Gill is going to win this fight via
Oh, I
stoppage.
know, I didn't know. I didn't know which way you were going with that. I had no clue when you said you come from. We've not talked about this before, so that's the first time I've heard that news. Yeah, continue on.
Yeah, just I'm probably being swayed more than I should have been because I was at ringside, obviously working for ESBR when Jordan Gill knocked out Michael Conlon in Belfast last time out. Conlon was a massive favourite going into that fight. Gill kind of a loss where would have thrown him right down the pecking order, and he looked sensational. He looked unbelievable. Those extra 4 pounds up at super featherweight seemed to have really, really, really helped and enhanced Jordan Gill. I think that he looked strong, albeit he's only got 9 KOs in his 28 victories, but he's only just up at super featherweight now. 1 KO in one fight at super featherweight, looking really strong, looks filled out. I think he's punching quite hard up at super featherweight, and I think Zelfa Barrett, albeit a really good fighter, and he's shown lots of improvement of late, mate. But I can see the thrill stopping Brown Flash here. To be quite honest with you, not early on, I maybe go mid rounds, round 6, 7, 8. But yeah, I'm going big. Jordan Gill knockout. What do you think?
You know what, Paul? I don't make that, but equally, I'm not going to disagree. Came on with the Congo Marku prediction the other week as well. Very, very strong. So I'm reluctant to go against you here. When I was watching this fight, I was thinking I don't necessarily see Gill with a knockout, but I could potentially see Jordan Gill winning on points. Equally, I could almost see also having a late stoppage. I actually think it's possibly going to go to points. Actually, is how I see this fight, and I'll stick with my gut, Paul. Not necessarily just to disagree with you. My gut was Barrett on points before this, before we did this video. So I'm going to stick with Barrett on points. The possibility possibly of a late stoppage, but I don't think it will come. I think it'll be Zelfa Barrett on points. Guys, that is all we've got time for. Paul and I have disagreed here. Let us know in the comments whether you agree or disagree with each of us, and the reasons why. Also, check out the channel. We've got other previews obviously coming up with Gerald Anderson, a heavyweight fight, heavyweight prospect there. We're discussing his, I suppose, the future favorite boxing and his relationship within it, as well as having other, reviews, content, pre-fighter interviews, etc. on the channel, big fight breakdowns, all that stuff. Paul, thank you very much for joining me. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching.